One show that stands out to me in particular from all the years of touring that I've done, all the amazing adventures that my brothers and I have been on, was a festival in Austria called Nova Rock. It's one of the biggest festivals in Europe. And not only was it this huge festival that also happened to be on my birthday, but our mum and dad had flown up from New Zealand to be there. It's always kind of a crazy experience, you know. I've sort of gotten used to the surreal feeling of looking across the stage and seeing your brothers up there with you. I will say that there are times where, you know, you're rocking out up on stage and then you look across and I'll see Chris or Kent and I'll think, shit, we're all up on this stage in this foreign country playing music. And when you think back to when you were a kid, you're just one of three brothers. It's kind of a buzzy thing to think about. So over time, I've sort of gotten used to touring with my brothers, although I do have these moments sometimes where that kind of hits home. But what makes it really different is when mum and dad come and join us too. And on this tour we were on, mum and dad had flown up from New Zealand. And so we pull up to this festival in Austria called Nova Rock. And we played it before, but this is the first time that our parents had been there. And I just remember, as always with those big European festivals, you know, we've done a lot of big stuff before. We've been very, very lucky in that regard. But the European festivals are like another size bigger again. You know, it's always bigger than what you remember. And the headliner that day was Linkin Park. And that's also very significant for me because Linkin Park was really my favorite band growing up. And I would say they had more of an influence on me and the kind of music that I wanted to make than any other band. And I know that that's true for so many people because Linkin Park were so incredibly inspirational for so many people. Certainly as a singer, I've spent my entire life hoping to get to, you know, 1% of the talent that Chester Bennington had. And I don't think I've ever arrived at that, but I love just having someone like that to inspire you. You know, even now that he's passed, he's still just a massive inspiration to me and so many other people. So I remember this day specifically, not just because our parents were there and because it was a huge festival, but also because the headliner was one of my favorite bands and with really my all-time favorite singer. And it's kind of surreal, not only to play with someone that you have really idolized, but to have that experience while your mum and dad are also there. I mean, that's a real worlds collide type experience because on the one hand, you have this very surreal feeling of having arrived to some degree at the same point as your idols. Now, I'm not trying to say that we had arrived at the level of Linkin Park, but I am saying that literally we were playing the same festival they were. So you're in the same catering tent and you're all walking around backstage and you have arrived in the general world that they live in. That in itself is a very surreal feeling. Now, what's even more surreal is to have your parents there because your parents represent the life that you came from. Your parents represent, you know, being a kid. And for my brothers and I, growing up in New Zealand. So growing up on the other side of the world from where we have done the vast majority of our touring, where most of our adventures have taken place. So you have this kind of very interesting collision of worlds. And our parents have always been so awesome. They've been so supportive. They've been so encouraging And to their credit, they have gotten into a lot of music and started listening to a lot of bands that I would have never expected, because they come out on tour with us and they'll see us playing with different bands, and they'll remember that these are bands that we would always talk about. You know, like for me, anyone who knew me growing up, it was impossible to know me without knowing that I loved Linkin Park. And I know that that's true for so many musicians and so many people in general. But I think for our parents, it was especially cool to come to this festival, not only see this huge show that we were playing, but also to see that we were literally playing with a band that we had idolized, and a band that had inspired us to become a band and start writing songs in the first place. So that show always stands out to me. It was Nova Rock in Austria, Linkin Park were the headliner, our parents were there. I remember looking across the stage while we were playing and seeing my mum standing next to the guys from Steel Panther. And I'll say, that is a combination of people that I never thought I would see. We've played with Steel Panther a lot. We love those dudes, obviously. Anyone who knows them knows that they have an amazing sense of humor that is off the charts. And so to see my mum standing next to Satchel from Steel Panther was, that was another sort of pinch yourself moment. And I remember being on stage playing guitar and looking across and seeing them and thinking like, is that my mum with the guys from Steel Panther? Like, am I actually seeing this? Am I seeing this right? Or am I imagining this? So you have all these like really interesting matchups. My mum with Satchel from Steel Panther. My dad in catering talking to the guys from Five Finger Death Punch. You know, you just have these really interesting experiences as a family. And that's part of why this show has always stuck with me. The other reason that it's always stuck with me, which is a little more somber, is that it was actually one of the last shows that Chester ever played. And at the time, I remember thinking how significant this show felt for me as someone who was a massive Linkin Park fan and truly, you know, idolized Chester, both as a singer, but also I always just loved what he represented as a human being. You know, anyone I ever talked to just said what a nice guy he was, what a sweet guy he was. You'd think the frontman of the biggest band in the world would have every reason to be the other end of the spectrum, but everybody spoke so highly of him. So I really sort of valued that about him too. And I remember when we played the show at Nova Rock, thinking like, this is an amazing milestone in my life, just as a music fan, not even as a musician myself, but just as a music fan, you know, to be here at this show, watching this performance. The fact that we had also played the same show was quite surreal. And it was only until a few weeks later that that I heard that Chester had passed, and that was when it really hit me just what an experience that was. Because at the time I had no idea that Chester had so few days left on this earth. And it really brought the whole thing to another level of significance. So the other day somebody was asking me, you know, what's the most significant show that you've played? Or what's a show that really stands out? And all the touring that you've done, all the countries you've been to, all the festivals you've played. I mean, we have truly been so lucky. But that one will always stand out.